Good evening. It is time for today's Tax Talk. I'm your host. I'm attorney Stephen Leahy. It is Monday, August 29th, the year of our Lord 2022. Still the big news is this Inflation Reduction Act and the adding 87,000 IRS employees. Last Thursday we reviewed an op-ed from the commissioner of the IRS, Charles Rettig, and there's some responses to that, to his op-ed, a couple of other op-eds, and we're going to review them here today. You know, some people don't agree with them. I was one of them, but I think there's more than just me. So we're gonna let's get into that. We'll get into this first one from CNBC. So let's do that. So here we are. And gotta go back out. There we go. The op-ed. The IRS just isn't prepared for the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, why would someone say something like that? That just doesn't seem right. Oh, you know what else I didn't do, though? But I didn't do my intro. So let's do the intro, and then we'll do this. It's just because I'm excited. I want to get into this. So I start skipping stuff, so let's do it now, okay? So here we go. The Tax Foundation. I'm not going to read the bullet points because we're going to find the bullet points within the text. With much fanfare, President Joe Biden has signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act. Remember, I always have to laugh whenever I hear that. It's such a joke. Historians may one day say this legislation did more to complicate an already too complicated tax code than any tax bill in the past 50 years. Kind of true. It is now up to the Internal Revenue Service to administer this law, and even with increased funding, it is not ready for the task. And if passed is a prologue, it may never be. The law raises taxes by some $300 billion over the next decade, largely by creating two new taxes on corporations. The first is a 15% tax on the corporation's book or accounting income if the tax liability that they report to the IRS is zero. The law now requires firms to calculate their tax liability twice, as if doing it once was not burdensome enough. The second corporate tax is the new excise tax on the repurchase of corporate stock. Excise taxes are special taxes on specific products, such as cigarettes. They are typically levied with an intent to discourage the consumption of those products and mitigate the harm of them. And of course, they think that buying your own stock back is a bad thing. These new taxes will be extremely hard for the IRS to enforce, and they come at an economic cost. Doesn't everything come at an economic cost? As we even saw with Dr. Wayne, W-E-N, from CNN today coming up and realizing there's an economic cost for the shutdowns. And she has now done a 180 on that because her own child is being affected. When it's your children, she's not too concerned about it. When it's her children, now it's important. The Tax Foundation estimates that these new taxes will reduce the long-run size of the U.S. economy by 0.2%, eliminate 29,000 jobs, and do nothing to tame inflation. I think that goes without saying. Admittedly, these are milder effects than the original Build Back Better Act, since it was, I think, 5 times the size. But the impact of this bill's complexity could be much greater and more difficult to measure. These new taxes are used to pay for 26 new or expanded tax subsidies for various climate and energy industries at a cost of roughly $260 billion over the next decade. Each of these expanded credits will come with its own complex rules and regulations dictating who is eligible and for how much. The IRS has failed to fix key issues for nearly 40 years. I don't know if this guy follows me, maybe. As the complexity of our tax code continues to grow exponentially, so too does the challenge of administering it. This begs the question, is the IRS ready? Lawmakers approved $80 billion in new spending for the IRS. Ostensibly, the majority of these funds will be used to beef up enforcement activities. This will purportedly raise an additional $205 billion over the next decade, according to the Congressional Budget Office. But will more money for enforcement be enough? Let's not forget that the IRS is an agency that had to rush to hire 5,000 new workers this year to manage the backlog of 23 million paper tax returns that had piled up over the last 2 years. Filing season, I believe it was 10,000. That's my recollection. A recent photo in the Washington Post showed the cafeteria in the IRS's Austin, Texas facility filled with paper tax returns waiting to be processed. We talked about it on this show, and I had that picture on the show. The article points to this as justification for why the IRS needed $80 billion in new funding. Why do you need $80 billion? Well, we're behind. $80 billion is a lot of money. But these arguments ignore the fact that the IRS has failed to fix these issues for nearly 40 years. I think it's more than 40 years. In 1986, the IRS launched a multi-billion-dollar effort to modernize its obsolete computer systems to reduce its dependence on manually inputting paper returns. They still manually put paper returns. To this day, they still don't scan them in like every other office in America. Nearly a decade later, in 1995, and then General Accounting Office of Congress reported that the IRS's efforts to modernize tax processing at a serious risk due to remaining pervasive management and technical weaknesses that impede modernization efforts. By 2000, Treasury's Inspector General for the Tax Administration reported that the IRS, after spending more than $3 billion, was incapable of managing the modernization process and had to turn it over to a private contractor. Since 2000, the IRS has spent more than $4.8 billion, after adjusting for inflation, on technology and business service modernization. Outdated technology remains a drag on the IRS. We've talked a lot on this show. To be sure, some of these investments have improved the ability of taxpayers to file electronically and the IRS to manage those returns and flag questionable entries. In 2000, just 16% of tax returns of all types, individual business, employment, and excise taxes, were filed electronically. In 2021, 78% of all returns were filed electronically. 90% of individual returns are filed that way. Again, last time I looked, it was like 93%. You still have payroll taxes, which is a vast, many returns because they're done quarterly and things. Taxpayers using commercial software such as TurboTax are now doing the work for the IRS. Yet at the time when many taxpayers can file their tax return on the cell phone, the IRS still does not have the technology to scan paper returns and must enter them manually as done during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. As the Washington Post story noted, many IRS computers are still running on computer language written in the 1960s, COBOL. The IRS and its defenders say many of the problems are due to underfunding and staff attrition. In fairness, the IRS budget hasn't changed much over the past 20 years after adjusting for inflation. I've talked about this. Now, he talks about it a little bit, but he doesn't give them I don't think he weighs the impact correctly. My own opinion. Its budget in 2021 is roughly the same as it was in 2001 in today's dollars. Moreover, staffing has declined dramatically over the decades. In 1991, when the technology modernization program started in earnest, the IRS had more than 114,000 full-time employees. I think that went until 1995, and that was the height of IRS employees. The IRS had more than 100. Today, it is roughly 75,000. But in the same way that ATMs have reduced staffing at banks and self-checkout has made buying groceries faster, e-filing and technology had made the IRS modestly more efficient. By the IRS's own account, it cost 56 cents to raise $100 in tax revenues in 1991. Today, it receives 35 cents to raise. It takes 35 cents to raise $100. Despite these modernization efforts, the IRS is still far behind the technology curve, and tax complexity compounds these problems. The Inflation Reduction Act doesn't fix these issues, it greatly adds to them. Under the weight of an increasingly complex tax system, the IRS is not an agency that can fix itself. and Congress throwing money at it for new technology and thousands of new auditors without structural reform will not get the job done. That's just his opinion. And I share that opinion. So I agree that that's a problem. I have another story, and this one is directly related to the what we talked about on our last time together on Thursday, on Watch Talk Radio, where we talked about the Commissioner Reddick and his op-ed piece. So now here's a response to that op-ed piece. I think it's fairly short, so let's get to it. Okay, here it is. IRS Commissioner OpEd really shattered his professional credibility, Heritage Fellow says. Joel Griffith, Research Fellow for Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation, joins Yahoo Finance Live to respond to the IRS Commissioner's op-ed and discuss the agency's funding for the Inflation Reduction Act. Remember, though, that Reddick op-ed was on Yahoo Finance, and so I think you'll see the tilt on this story as we read it. The IRS is pushing back against Republican criticism over the $80 billion in new funding it received as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Do I have to laugh every time? Yeah, I can't help myself. Now IRS Commissioner Chuck Reddick publishing an op-ed on Yahoo Finance, writing, quote, "The recent debate over providing badly needed funding to the IRS is filled with outright false suggestions about what the agency and our hardworking employees do, as well as how the additional resources will be handled." Well, joining us now is Joel Griffith. Joel is a research fellow at Thomas A. Rowe Institute of Economy Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So I wanted to first get your response, because a lot of people, when they saw this infusion of $80 million, it's $80 billion, well, we're thinking, this means that the IRS is going to be coming after me. Has this done much to clear up some of these misperceptions? No, unfortunately, the commissioner's opinion piece at Yahoo Finance really shattered his professional credibility, as it was filled with distortions, half-truths, and a lot of straw man arguments. I think this guy follows me too. And I spent some time really going through this and dissecting it today. Well, we dissected it last Thursday on Watch Talk Radio. I should probably put a link to that video underneath us. And I spent some time really going over it. And the sad truth is that the additional 80 plus billion of hiring 87,000 new tax agents, this is going to be a real threat against small business owners and against American families. And I encourage everyone to look at what has gone on in the past. If you look at the audit data, we know that the majority of audits have actually targeted those with under $75,000 in adjusted gross income reported. This is because the earned income tax credit is ripe with corruption. And we also know that there have been far more audits against small S corporations and sole proprietors and partnerships than there have been in audits against the big C corporations. And that's what we have to look forward to in the coming years as the IRS doubles its agent task force size. If you've been totally honest on your taxes, why would you worry about an audit? I love that question, because everybody just, well, if you're being audited, you've done something wrong. You deserve to pay. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Well, if you ever look at the size of the tax code, it is enormous. There are thousands of pages of the tax code and regulations. And really, if you consult, say, 5 attorneys about how much in taxes you owe, what you will take is the form of deductions. Those 5 attorneys will likely give you 20 different opinions. And the fact is, depending on which actual agent is taking a look at your taxes, you might have 20 different opinions from those 20 different agents. That is absolutely correct. That is true as true can be. And the bottom line is, if you get audited, even if you have been paying your taxes as you owe, even if the IRS at the end of the day agrees with what you've paid, the taxes that you owe, the fees that you can rack up in terms of lawyer fees and accountant fees can easily run $20,000. That's a lot of money for an income earner, just a regular wage earner. But if you are a small business owner, especially if you have 6 or 7 employees, you likely don't have a full-time lawyer or accountant. And that $20,000 audit bill can really set you back as a small business owner or as an individual. And actually, I was going to say, It's really about record keeping. So you can do everything right. I mean, in your deductions and things. But when they come to you and say, "Hey, do you have the proof of that?" You won't have the right proof that they're looking for, and so then they will deny it, and you'll pay taxes on those deductions that would otherwise be totally correct and deductible. But because you don't, not because you didn't spend it correctly, but because you didn't keep the records correct. And many small businesses have this problem with business tax records. Well, it's not that you'll have that tax bill. It's just that the very threat itself. If you're a small business owner, knowing that your audit might come after you, knowing that you can spend hundreds of hours that you should be devoted to keep growing your business, that should be devoted to growing your business, that instead you're going to have to be poring over paperwork during your working hours and at night with your lawyers and accountants trying to escape what might be an enormous tax bill that potentially you don't even owe. The very threat itself is going to weigh on small business owners and the families. And if we're doubling the size of that task force or of that agent force, you can be looking at a total number of audits to double or even more than double. In fact, if you look at the total number of 87,000 new agents that are going to be hired, that comes out to be about one new agent for every 1,500 households. Basically, one new agent being to be patrolling every neighborhood across the country. Just the threat itself is going to weigh heavily on individuals. Joel, you know the IRS has been cut and cut and cut for years, if not decades, and that's why we've had this backlog several years at times, long in terms of the paperwork. Now they haven't been able to get you your refunds quick and fast enough. Hiring more agents will get you your money faster. Don't you want the IRS adequately funded? They think this doubling it to 80 billion isn't enough. They should have more. Doubling it isn't enough. They can't. It's not enough to do the job that they need to do. Well, unfortunately, we know that almost 70% of these funds, and this is actually in the commissioner's letter, up to 70% of those funds are going to be used for hiring more auditors, more agents, rather than hiring customer service agents like you just mentioned. Of course, I would love the IRS to quickly pick up the phone if I have a question, but the bulk of this money, going by what the IRS itself is estimating, the bulk of this money is going to auditors, to people that are going to be hounding business and hounding families. Only a small portion of that will be going to systems of modernization or customer service agents. Joel, the IRS says 50,000 are expected to retire in the next few years. Don't we need to replace them? Well, if you look at this funding, the funding itself is above and beyond the funding that would have already been going towards the IRS. So the funding is already in place to maintain the total number of agents and the total number of auditors. This package is going to increase the total number. This is above and beyond the current force. In fact, we can expect each and every year over the next 10 years that the IRS will be adding auditors above and beyond those that are retiring. Remember, this is a shakedown of the American people. The only way that this spending package is going to be so-called paid for is to be extracting more tax dollars out of the individuals. And the Heritage Foundation, we have poured through the prior audit data to see who it's being targeting. And if those numbers hold true going forward with the new auditors, you can expect that an average family over that 10-year period can expect, largely because of this, to see about $2,000 additional taxes each and every year. And you're going to have an increased risk of having an IRS audit shakedown. Now, Joel, you mentioned some of this inconsistencies between the agents that can sometimes lead to some of these audits. But with this investment that they're expecting in some of these enhanced IT systems, that's actually supposed to make some of these audits go down and actually make it easier to comply with some of these laws. So why would that not be a good investment? Yeah, that's a great question for the commissioner, because although 30% of the funds, total funds, will be going to hiring more customer service type agents and business modernization, 70% of these funds are going to hiring more auditors. So that doesn't make sense that on the one hand, they're trying to fund the modernization. On the other hand, the bulk of these funds are going to go ahead and go towards auditors. And we need to keep in mind that, once again, the tax code is so complex that you can get 20 different legal opinions from just a handful of lawyers. Joel, Aren't you worried that this kind of rhetoric endangers the safety of people that are just saying, trying to work hard and bust their butt, that happen to work for the IRS? Oh, you're calling out the IRS. They're going to be in danger now. Really? How about the danger that they're giving to the American people? Joel, I'm concerned about regular families, and I'm concerned about small business owners that are having to go through each and every quarter and each through every year under fear that they're going to have an IRS agent come after them and take up their valuable time and their valuable resources to force them to fork over more dollars to the federal government. That they're going to have to worry about these IRS agents and the lawyers for the government freezing their accounts. All right, Joel, and making it impossible for them to earn a living. That is what I'm concerned about. Gotta leave it there, Joel Griffin. Appreciate the time. I wonder what side he was on, right? So I thought that was a good response, though, to Rettig's op-ed. Kind of mirrored my own response, but I think it's important that we don't let this go. I don't think by questioning whether it's proper for the IRS to audit everybody at these high levels endangers IRS agents. It's just a fact. We have to call it out and say, that's what's going on. Remember on the Thursday when I talked about the Rettig op-ed, he kept saying, well, there's not 87,000 new armed people. Well, nobody said that there was. But there are going to be more armed IRS agents. That's just a fact. It goes by their own numbers, right? We know that they bought $700,000 worth of ammunition between March and April of this year. Why? And if you ask that question, I don't think it endangers anybody to try to get the answer. It just seems like we deserve an answer, don't we? Anyway, that's where we are today. I am transcoding that pipeline software. I want to put that up. I don't have time to do it now, but we'll do it in the next couple of days. Tomorrow is Crypto Tuesday, so you'll want to join us there for Crypto Tuesday. Remember, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe. We need your help to get this information out, and you can do that by liking and subscribing and sharing this information with others. So thanks so much for joining us. And remember, if you have an IRS problem, if you're fighting the IRS and you owe the IRS money, or you have unfiled tax returns, and you don't know what to do, here's the first thing you should do. Get a copy of my book, Deal with Your IRS Problem Today. Go to freeirsbook.com, freeirsbook.com. Get your free copy of Deal with Your IRS Problem Today. We will ask for a small shipping and handling fee, but the book itself and all the bonuses are free. So thanks so much for joining us here today. Remember, again, tomorrow is Crypto Tuesday. You won't want to miss it, and we want you here with us. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you here tomorrow. Out.